Hi everyone, I'm Celine from Blue Calla Patterns and welcome to video 2 for the Winterberry Wallet. I'm going to follow the same order as the pattern, and we're going to start by assembling our two snap tabs and our slip pocket tab. So you're going to need your 4 snap tab pieces. So either you're using fabric or you're using a non-frame material like I am. So I'm going to be using cork. And if you're using fabric, obviously your pieces are going to be this size, not this size. And you will have fusible woven interfacing on the wrong side of all 4 pieces. And then under 2 pieces, on the wrong side of 2 pieces, you will have some Decaville light. And then for the snap tabs, you're going to need the 14mm magnetic snap. For the slip pocket tab, again, if you're using fabric, your pieces are going to be this size, not this size. And you're also going to have fusible woven interfacing on the wrong side of both pieces. And then one piece will have some Decaville light fused to the wrong side. And then you'll also need, for the slip pocket tab, you're going to need a piece of firm sew-in interfacing, which you would cut using this piece. And we're actually going to do a little bit of extra trimming on this one a little bit later. And then you're also going to need your 18mm magnetic snap. So I'm going to just set aside the slip pocket tab for now, and we're going to work on the snap tabs. So I have 2 pieces here, 2 pieces here. Now I'm going to go through the instructions. If you're using cork or vinyl like I am, I'll do that first, and then I'll just explain to you the differences if you're using fabric instead. So the first thing you're going to want to do is mark the location of your magnetic snap on 2 of the pieces. So I'm just going to take one from each set. And so I've included the mark for your magnetic snap. So I just use a hole punch and I punch out that mark, and then I use it to mark the location of my snaps. So one there, and then one here. Okay, and then you're going to use the washer that came with your magnetic snap, and you're going to place it over those marks, and you want the mark to be in the center hole of the washer. And then you mark the location of the prongs on either side of that center hole. And again, you're doing that on both pieces. Okay. And then you're going to carefully cut out the prong marks. Okay, so I did bring a seam ripper, so I'm just going to, now I don't recommend sticking this in there and then just cutting. So I use the pointy end and I start at the bottom of the prong mark, and I right away put it through up to the top of that mark, and then that way there you're only cutting the part where the prong will be. And apparently I've picked a very dull seam ripper. So up to this point, it would be the same for fabric snap tabs. Once you've cut out the prong holes, if you're using fabric, you would want to apply some fray check, because you don't want those prong holes to fray or come apart any more than the amount that you're cutting. Okay, so at this point, if you're using fabric, you're going to want to add a drop of fray check on those marks that you've just cut out so that they don't fray further. So the magnetic snap has 2 parts to it, a male part and a female part. So you're installing one part into the one snap tab and then the second part in the other. Okay, so you insert the prongs in towards from the right side towards the wrong side, place your washer, and then fold that in. I find if the prongs are really strong that I have to use something else to push them down. So, okay, and then same for the second one. Now, if you're using fabric, you should be installing the magnetic snap in the snap tab pieces that have the Decaville light. And that's just because you want to make sure that you're installing the snap in fairly stable fabric. So now all I'm going to do is, because I'm using cork or vinyl, I am going to use fabric glue. So I'm going to use Fabri-Tac, and I'm going to glue these two pieces together, and they have to be glued wrong sides together. If you're using fabric, you're going to be doing this entirely differently. You're going to be sewing them right sides together. So your pieces are this size if you're using fabric. So you're going to place them right sides together, and then you're just going to sew along this edge. Make sure that you backstitch at the beginning and the end. And then you're going to trim that seam allowance to 1/8 of an inch, and then you're going to turn them right side out, and then they should end up something very close to this size. But because I'm using cork, so I'm just going to carefully, I want to apply a really thin layer. Don't put too much glue because it will cause the top of the cork to, the top layer of the cork to lift a little. Okay, so, and try to make sure that you're lining up those edges as perfectly as you can. And then I give this a good chance to dry before I start sewing. So I'm actually just going to put some clips, some wonder clips, and then I'm actually just going to set this aside and work on other things. When it's dry, you're just going to do a line of top stitching all the way along the outer edges. You don't have to sew this bottom edge. So you're going to just do a line of top stitching, sewing the two pieces together, and you're going to use about a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance from these outer edges. And then we're doing exactly the same thing with the other snap tab. So really thin layer of glue. I glue them wrong sides together. And then make sure that those edges are, so if your edges are not lined up perfectly, it's not a big deal, because of course we can make slight mistakes when we're cutting these pieces out. Once you've done the sewing all the way around, then you can just very carefully with really sharp scissors just trim the edges so that they match up perfectly. You'll want to seal, you're going to want to seal the edges if your vinyl or your cork frays at all. I use a product called Reseline, and I just use a cotton swab and I just brush it onto the sides. But you can use edge paint or whatever you have handy. Okay, so now these are done. We're going to let them dry completely before I sew them. Now we're going to work on our slip pocket tab. Now, whether you're using cork or vinyl or you're using fabric, the first thing we're going to do with this firm interfacing piece is I want to trim 1/2 an inch from this bottom edge. And that's just to reduce bulk in the seam. And then you're going to trim away about 1/4 of an inch all the way around the outer edge. You might need to adjust this a little bit later if you're finding it's not really fitting very well. So once we've trimmed away a little bit from the slip pocket tab from interfacing, the one difference from the snap tab is that we're actually going to glue this to the wrong side of one piece, and this is going to be the piece where we install our magnetic snap. And that's just to give a bit more stability to our magnetic snap. Okay, so you want to place it so you have the 1/2 inch of space here and about 1/4 inch all the way around. And now we're going to do exactly what we just did for the snap tabs. You're going to use the pattern piece and transfer the mark for your magnetic snap. Now, we are not using both halves of the 18 millimeter magnetic snap yet. We're just going to use 1/2 and install 1/2 into the slip pocket tab. I usually use the male half, so not the one that has the hole, but the other one. I use this one usually on a tab just because it's thinner. So now again, we're repeating the same thing, and we're using the washer to mark the location of our prongs. And I think I'm going to need to get a much sharper seam ripper. So now when I'm cutting out the prong holes, I'm doing it through the cork and through the firm interfacing, because we're going to install the magnetic snap through both layers. Oof. Okay, so now I'm going to pass this through both layers, turn this around, add my washer, fold the prongs over. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing as we did with the snap tabs, and we're going to glue these two together. And they're being glued wrong sides together. So again, a very thin layer of glue all over. Now, the same thing applies to the slip pocket tab if you're using fabric. Your pieces are going to be bigger, and once your magnetic snap is in, you're going to sew them right sides together, not wrong sides together. And then trim the seam allowance to 1/8 of an inch. Turn it so that it is right side facing out. And you'll want to give it a press. Insert the firm sew-in interfacing in between the layers, and then top stitch. But with this version, I'm just going to set this aside and give it a good few minutes so that the glue really dries before I sew along the outside edges, just like I'm going to do for the snap tabs. Okay, so now I'm just going to leave all these to dry. If you're doing the fabric version, it's going to be a lot faster for you because you don't have to let glue dry. You're just doing sewing and pressing. So now all of our tabs are ready, minus the stitching on the exterior. And now the last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to seal the edges. Okay, so I'm going to set these aside for now. The next thing you're going to need are your card slots. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to make the card slots with one of the pieces, and then you'll just have to pause the video and repeat exactly the same thing with the second set of card slots. So in the pattern on page 6, I show you the lines that you need to draw on the wrong side. So you start at the bottom. So if you're using a directional print for your card slots, you want the print to go this way. So the first line is at 2 1/8 of an inch. Now, I cut my bottom edge here. So the thing with card slots is to be as precise as possible when you're cutting. So I also want the edges here to line up as much as possible once I start the folding of the card slots. So I usually use a line on my ruler and align it with this edge. And then if the bottom edge is a little bit crooked, then I can just sort of adjust it so that it's as straight as possible. So the first line is at 2 1/8 of an inch. And I draw my line all the way across. If you're using a fabric pen, it's even better. I don't have a fabric pen. So the next line is 4 inches above that first line that you just drew. And then again, I'm checking to see that the one line here is perfectly aligned with the edges. And then the next line is again at 4 inches from that line that you just drew. Okay, so there's 2 1/8, 4 inches, 4 inches, and then one last time, 4 inches. Okay, so now you'll need to get your iron and your ironing board or ironing mat. Okay, so at every line that we just drew, we are going to fold the card slot piece wrong sides together. If you have a metal ruler like this, I highly recommend using it because you can iron over it, no problem. If you have a plastic ruler, depending on the brand, it may melt a little bit. So I prefer using a metal ruler. It will get hot though, so just be careful. But they're thinner, and I find that they really help with making nice folds in the card slot piece. And I also like to do one line at a time. So I fold it wrong sides together, I press it, and I go over to the machine and I top stitch it. Okay, so the first one is done. This is going to be at the bottom. So now we're going to do the same thing with the next line. Fold it wrong sides together. And then I will top stitch. Okay, so now we have 2 folds. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for the last 2 lines. Okay, so all 4 folds have been pressed and top stitched. So the next thing you're going to do is we're going to make some marks on the right side of the card slot. So beneath each fold, it's easier if you flatten them like this. Beneath each fold, half an inch down from this folded edge, you're going to make a mark on both sides. So half an inch. So on this side and then again on this side. Okay, and then do the same for the other 3. Okay, so now we have marks 1/2 inch down from each of the folded top stitched edges. So you'll notice in the pattern that I've numbered each fold. So this is fold 1, 2, 3, and 4 at the bottom. So we'll place it like this so that it matches the diagram on page 6 of your pattern. You're going to need some pins or clips. So what you're going to do is you're going to bring fold number 2, and you'll want to just place this on the back like this now. So you want to bring fold 2 up to fold 1, and that top folded edge of fold 2 is going to be at that mark that we just made, that is 1/2 inch below this top folded edge. And you're going to do that on each side. So try to position your pin or your clip right at the mark here, so that it's not in the way of folding the others. What I like to do at this point is just press a little bit, and it kind of sets the position of that card slot. So now we're doing the same thing for fold 3. We're bringing it just up 1/2 inch below fold 2. I lost my clip here. On both sides. And then you add another clip to hold it in place. And you just press that in place as well. And then the last is fold 4. Bring it to 1/2 inch below fold 3. I just realized I made marks beneath this one, but I didn't have to because there are no more card slots. Oh well. Okay, so just going to press that to hold it in place. And if you want to be extra certain that they are nice and straight, just use your ruler and check the distance here between each fold to make sure that it's 1/2 inch along that center. Okay, and then just going to flip it over, and I want to press it from this side as well. Okay, so now we're going to go over to the machine, and we just want to do a quick basting stitch along both sides. Don't do 1/8 of an inch. I would like you to go in 3/8 of an inch away from the edge when you're doing your basting stitch. And that's because we're going to be trimming it in the next step, and we don't want to trim those basting stitches. Okay, so they're basted on the sides now. Just going to give them a press again. Now, I did have some testers that added some small strips of Decaville Light in between each card slot layer. I don't do that, and the reason why I don't do that is because the wallet is already very difficult to turn right side out in the end, and I think adding any more makes it even more difficult. So if you're having problems with your hands, then I probably wouldn't do it. I still find that they're sturdy enough as they are. Okay, so now we're just going to take this out because we have to do a little bit of trimming. Okay, so we need the total width of the card slot piece to be 8 inches. So I find, so there's this space between these two, this is 8 inches. So I just center it because I want to trim a little bit from both sides. That way there I can make sure that they're very, very straight. And when you're doing this part, make sure that they don't shift at all and that you're cutting them too small. Okay, so I'm trimming about 1/4 inch off of each side, approximately. Okay, and then I'm just going to flip it over. And I place my fold here along the line. That way there I know I'm cutting them nice and straight. Okay, and then the second thing that you're going to want to check is to make sure that the height of your card slot piece is exactly 3.5 inches. So 1, 2, 3, and then a half. So mine is a tiny bit too tall. So I'm going to be trimming about, well, it's crooked at the bottom, but roughly a 1/4 inch, maybe a bit less. Okay, so now this is exactly 8 inches, 3.5 inches. So now I'm going to make a mark along the center of the card slots. And since it's exactly 8 inches, we're making a mark 4 inches from either side. And I'm going to do that in a couple of places. And then I'm going to sew from that bottom center mark up to the center mark at the top edge. I'm going to make sure that I backstitch at the beginning and the end. And I actually do a little bit of backstitching at the top folded edge of each card slot piece because I want to make sure that with use that the stitching doesn't come undone in the center. Okay, so now we have 6 card slots, and in the back here we're going to have a slip pocket. Okay, so now that we've done one set of card slots, we're going to repeat exactly the same steps for the second card slot piece. Okay, so I've got both of my card slots ready, and now you're going to need your main lining piece. Now, make sure that you're very careful that you're installing these properly. So you have one side that is 8 inches and one that's 7 3/4 inches. So obviously you want the length here, the width of the card slots, which is 8 inch, to match up with the 8 inch side of your main lining piece. So if you see, this is 8 inches, and then this is slightly too small, but it's very small difference, but it will make a difference in the end result. So you want to make sure that you're putting these in the right location. All right, so we are putting one sit on one side like this and pin or clip it in place. I find that pins just cause a bit of inaccuracies, I guess, when it comes to card slots. So I tend to stay away from them for this part and use clips instead. So make sure that the bottom edge of your card slots is here. So this is your 4 folded edges, and they should be going towards the center of that main lining piece. Okay, so there's going to be about 3/4 of an inch of space in between the two here in the center. Okay, and then what I'm going to do for now is I'm just going to go all the way around and do a quick basting stitch with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so now that you have your card slots basted, you'll see now we have those slip pockets underneath. And you could also, if you have a credit card or any kind of card, you can go ahead and check out your card slots. Make sure that all your cards fit nicely. Now you're going to need your snap tabs, and we know that this middle line here separating our card slots is the center of this edge. So you're just going to place one snap tab so that it's centered over that center line of stitching in the middle of your card slots. I'm pretty good at estimating the center at this point, but if you want to make sure, just measure this edge, the length of this edge, and put a mark at the center. What's really most important though is that these are lined up this way so that your wallet closes nicely in the end. Okay, so now we're just going to quickly baste these in place. Okay, so they're now basted in place. I'm going to switch my thread color because I'm going to be top stitching my my bands, my curved band and my zipper band. And I like the thread color to match. Okay, so now you're going to need the zipper band and the curved band, and you're going to clip one to each end. So the end where you have the snap tabs, and it really doesn't matter which one you attach to which end of the card slots because it's identical on both edges, so it really doesn't make a difference at this point. As long as you're attaching these pieces to the edges, the bottom edges of your card slots, where the snap tabs are located, that's all that really matters. Okay, and now we're going to go over to the machine. We're just going to sew these in place along this edge and this edge. Make sure that you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Now, you're supposed to sew these on with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and it can be a little bit tricky to sew straight because there's a bottom edge here of the last card slot, which is sort of in the way, like it's right exactly where you're going to be sewing. So just take your time. Okay, and then once these are sewn, so if you've used fabric for your bands, then you can press them away from the card slots, and then you're going to top stitch that seam allowance with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance from this folded edge. I've used cork. I can't press it, so I'm going to finger press and top stitch at the same time. Now, if you're finger pressing a cork or vinyl like I am, make sure that you're really tugging so that you don't have fabric bunched up here, because otherwise your lining and your exterior of your wallet are going to be different dimensions, and it'll be much more difficult to do the final assembly. Okay, so the lining of our wallet is complete. We have 2 slip pockets and 12 card slots, and we have our magnetic snap closure. So you're going to see, if you try to close it, that there's a bit of a extra curved band. That's fine. That's exactly what we want.